Yeah, I always like when I hear that music. That's some good stuff. Hey,
Okay,
welcome
good
to.
work. I was getting my groove on over here. I was like, wait a minute, is this the podcast or we have Spaghettinis? Which one is it?
No, we on the podcast. We on the
Okay.
podcast. Welcome everyone. This is the $1,000,000 Podcast, episode 4. And today I'm very excited about this podcast. The title of this podcast is Networking Among the Sexes, Part 1. Thank you for joining. I'm your host, Stefan Montgomery. And today I have two of my close friends and colleagues, Helen McSwain from McSwain Consulting and LaShondra Mercurius from JLM Strategic Talent Partners. Ladies, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay,
Yes,
glad to have
thank
you
you for
here.
having us.
No
Glad to be here.
problem. So here's the thing, because you ladies are so accomplished, I'm going to have to paraphrase your bios because otherwise we'd be listening to 10 minutes of all the things you accomplished. Okay. So we're going to go with Helen first. So, Helen, transit career spans across public and private sectors, excuse me. She's the president of McSwain Consulting Group, a business strategy and development firm. Helen has worked for both executive leadership at MARTA. I didn't know this, Helen, but I didn't know you worked in Metro Commuter Railroad. I never knew that. And the private sector, she worked for Atkins North America and Roadfox Construction Control Services. Helen is committed to exemplify her legacy and servant leadership with WTSI Board of Directors, Compto, after WTS. I would be remiss if I did not say that she belonged to the esteemed sorority of AKA Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Because I know if I missed that, she let me know. LaShondra via LinkedIn. I must also inform you that she didn't put this in her. LaShondra has her own podcast. LaShondra, what's the name of your podcast again?
It's called Real Talk with LaShondra Mercurius, and you can find it on Spotify and iTunes.
Okay, very good. So, in addition to running the businesses, she's on the workforce development. She's on WTS, and she's been an advocate in the infrastructure and transportation industries. And besides being a minority-owned small business owner, I'm smiling at this because me and LaShondra had this discussion the other day. She's the mother of two adult-age children and one rambunctious 10-year-old. I
Wow.
love Anthony, but he is rambunctious. He really is. He is a rambunctious. But what I thought was interesting when she put in her bio was it is her children who motivate her to work hard towards developing and empowering the LA workforce and communities to keep raising their socioeconomic status through connecting individuals to career and training opportunities. So it's interesting. I find it interesting that when I bring guests on here, as much as I know them, I don't know them, right? And I find out things about them. So you ladies are very accomplished, and we appreciate you coming on the podcast. But I'm gonna do a little monologue right now. I normally don't do this, but I have to explain to you why I did this particular podcast. So as you know, my company does outreaches, and I've been in the industry for a while and been to networking events. But I've always noticed that when women network, it's very different. I notice there's a little bit of a hesitancy, and it's happened to me several times, especially when I do these outreaches. I'm trying to help other companies get business, so I walk up to everybody. And it's almost like there's a hesitancy when I go to them. And then after a couple minutes, I see them relax. I'm like, oh, what's that? And then sometimes I see women, they're in the corner talking to other women. And I'm like, well, the key members are over here. You need to talk to them. Then I just happened to mention this to my staff, who happens to be all women. And they said, oh, no, boss. Oh, stuff happens. I said, really? They said some subtle, some overt. So I was like, whoa, I didn't know that. I was kind of shocked. I'll be honest with you, because for me, I just walk up to everybody. I don't think nothing of it. But for women, I realized, wow, there's a whole way of going about networking. And then I started to talk to other women in the industry, and this subject would come up, and they would go, oh, Steph, yeah, it's quite different for us. So I wanted to have you two on. And the reason I wanted to have you two on is because you're both accomplished, as we read in your bios. You both are well established in the industry and your businesses. You both ensure that women are represented in a positive way. You're members of WTS. And I watch both of you navigate the networking and this predominantly male space. I've been watching you. But what I see as an ease may not be the case. So I don't know that. So that's why I had you on here today, because I think it's important for you to relate your experience, right? And Helen, we're going to start with you first.
Sure.
Now, the question I'm going to ask you is this: can you relate your networking experience when you first started versus now? Any changes, or is it the same? Just tell us what you've been able to experience. And LaShondra, the same question for you once Helen's finished.
Okay, thanks, Stefan, and thank you for the opportunity to be on here with LaShondra today to talk about this topic of networking and the gender differences that exist.
Yeah,
I certainly think, as you know, we've been in the business a long time, so I can tell you from just the sheer fact of a couple of decades ago, being a woman, uh, starting out in a professional capacity in the transportation space it was particularly um, probably even more challenging then because we know transportation on the list of things is still one of the areas where it is still very much male dominant. And
okay,
back at that time, we had people like Shirley DeLibrio who had just started to reign in our industry. And she was telling stories about when she first showed up at some of the earlier conferences in her career. And they would have the girls with short dresses and, the bus suppliers and stuff. It was almost like a sexism associated with the industry. And
right,
women were projected. So in that, because during that time, at that time, those were things that were more the norm, right? So some of the tools that you learn to maneuver, which was largely through finding, my mentors found me as well, is you do seek out other women, and there are men who will help you maneuver and figure out how to navigate. And it can be a very challenging thing to do. But I would say certainly now the challenges are still there. But starting when we first started out in the industry, Stefan, I think we have made some huge. Um, there's been some real improvements, but the challenges are still there, and that's why LaShondra and I are members of WTS and other women's organizations because they're relevant and they feed to our needs.
so I'm before I go to you, LaShondra, we're going to come back to what those challenges are, because I don't want you to just to say there are still challenges. I want us to address those challenges today, talk about them, get it out there so people can understand it. Because I'll be honest with you, once again, I was very ignorant to this, right? I saw it a little bit, But I'm a big guy. I just walk up to people and start talking. I don't think nothing of it, right? But when I started to go to these outreaches and I'm the host because I want to make sure people are getting work, I see a lot of hesitancy. I'm like, "Ooh, wait a minute, what's going on here?" LaShondra, I don't want to cut you off. Please tell me your experience.
Well, Stefan, I keep it real.
Yeah, I know you do. That's why I got you on the platform.
So I agree with Helen. It's definitely challenging. I've been in this, well, I've been in this industry and adjacent to this industry probably since the early 2000s. And construction, infrastructure, transportation in general is male dominated. We all know that.
Right.
But I guess from a humanity standpoint, when it comes to simply men and women, there are things that, are at play when you're networking or when you're engaging with men. And a lot of it is just sexual energy, and
Right. Okay.
understanding how to navigate it. And the scale has definitely been lopsided, where anytime you're in a space with men and women, there's going to be sexual energy, there's going to be attraction, there's going to be all of that. All that stuff
Right.
is normal and it's okay. But the problem is that over the years, women are not able to navigate that from a place of ownership, from a place of autonomy. It's always been, I would say, controlled by the male dominant energy in the room. So
Okay.
that's where the hesitancy and the fear comes from, because sometimes it feels like a lack of
Okay.
control over your own space and control, over your own sexual energy that is going to be present anytime that you're talking to someone, whether it's intended for them or not.
Okay.
And so I think that in general, men in this space sort of lack awareness.
Okay.
So it's not we're going to bash men today and they're
Sure.
pigs and they're this and they're that. That's not it. It's really just a lack of education. It's a lack of understanding, because no one speaks about it. Nobody talks about it. It's sort of a hidden, unspoken way of life. And I think
Right.
having this podcast is very important, because this is something that should be on the table. And just like you said, I wasn't even aware, where the majority of the men that are out there, not all of them, some of them are just pigs, but
Right.
the majority of men out there are just not aware that their actions, their aggressiveness, or their approach is perceived in that way. So I love this topic, but I want to talk about it from a place of solutions and
Right.
not necessarily from a place of blame
Right.
or judgment.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring this topic, because I think, and I wouldn't say I was sexist, but I'm sure there's things I've said that made people uncomfortable, right? And when you have a female staff, and now I'm very aware of it, right? And I don't know if over the years, and if anybody's listening to me and I did that, I apologize. Okay, let me first say that. Okay, I don't think I did, but it's one of those things that you have to be very aware of, because once again, we live in a different world today, right? A lot of women hold power, right? And so what I realize is that if you have that type of flavor or that type of energy or that type of spirit, women are they can perceive things very easily. And you guys talk, let's be honest, okay? And
I don't know
so,
what you're talking about.
okay,
I don't know who told you those lies.
okay, but you talk. And so you don't want to be the business professional that is labeled as creepy,
Right.
because that may cause you not to get work or to get on a contract.
Right.
So I just want to be able to bring this awareness to people and just look at it a little different. One of the reasons I have this podcast is because I want to talk about the things that are not so comfortable, right? There's some other
Right.
topics we'll talk about later.
This portion of the Million Dollar Business Podcast is being sponsored by MSS Strategic Partners. MSS Strategic Partners is your business recruitment firm. They help small businesses connect with major corporations. They help major corporations source and vet small businesses to work with. At MSS, they like to say, they'll do all the work so you don't have to. For more information or demonstration of how they can help you, contact them on the web at mssstratpartners.com, or you can simply type in MSS Strategic Partners. Now back to our show.
Now, Helen, you talk about the challenges. You mentioned this word challenge. What are some of the challenges? I mean, because they're still there today.
Yeah, and I want to just sort of piggyback on LaShondra's comment about, being solution-based and recognizing, we've been living this. And I think something as simple we find sometimes as just having conversations. And like you said, you don't think you've ever done anything, Stefan, but maybe you have said something that was
right
or felt inappropriate to someone in the workplace. So I think there lies exactly what LaShondra was saying. It lies in education and awareness.
Right.
That just began to have more of these, this past 2 years, the whole race and social issue awareness that we've seen sort of kind of evolve in a big way. I think this is another element of that as we start talking about gender differences and talking about people in their own space feeling comfortable. LaShondra, again, women, we connect with each other. So when you were using a word like trust, that is such a huge word, trust. Believe it or not, I wrote it down on my paper before we started this podcast today. It's the fear factor that I think you said, like in the fear, it's the fear sometimes of something as simple, did I wear the right attire for the event?
Okay.
Because if not, you got a little bit of a panic going, oh, this might have not have been the most appropriate given the people I'm going to be interacting with today. Because you just always want to make sure, you got to be thinking about, how we talk about racial awareness.
Yes.
Feeling like you got to be prepared. You're always preparing. You're always prepping. You're always thinking about it. It's the same thing.
It's funny that you say that, because as you're talking, I don't think about that. I just put my suit on and go. Right.
But men don't have to think about a lot of things.
Right. I just
let me tell you something. Every morning I get up, I have a staunch routine, of how I prepare myself for the day. And I look over at my husband and he just roll on out of bed, hop on in the shower for 2 minutes, throw some clothes on, and he's out, and during that time, I may have barely finished washing my face.
Okay.
And that is the standard. There is a lot more that is required for women in this space. But at the same time, I want to bring some balance to the conversation because, we understand, what the world has been like. It's evolving, it's changing, and you're always going to have people with one foot in the old way and one foot in the new way. So you're always going to have that. But I feel like as a woman, you have to be prepared for any of that, because you're just dealing with human beings, and to have an expectation that all of the sexism, and that's really what it is not going to be present. It's just, to me, is very naive. And if as a woman, you are going to, put yourself out there, or if you're going to lead with your sexual energy or the way you look or the way you dress, if you got the girls all out, I'm not saying that puts you in a position where, you should be disrespected or groped in any way. However, you're dealing with people that potentially are not aware. They're reading signs based on the old way and not the new way. So albeit a woman can show up however she chooses, but she must understand that she's going to elicit certain responses from certain people, and you have to be prepared for that. That's just what it is. Is it fair? No. Is it difficult to navigate? Yes, but that's the reality. And I think that's something that needs to be put out on the table as well. Because again, we're human beings. We're like crocodiles. We only have like 5 different responses to things.
Okay.
So it's difficult to break those patterns. And I feel like if we want something to change, then both sexes are required to do things differently.
Right. And I agree with you 100%. And that's why we're talking about this topic, because we want to bring it up. We want things to change. We don't want things to stay status quo, because there are good people out there, there are good businesses, and we could connect. And sometimes we may have done something just slight that we don't even recognize that could have cost us money and revenue. So it's
what used to be a compliment, in the 50s and 60s is very offensive.
That's right.
Today.
That's right.
So it's a lot of, education. I was actually at an event just recently, maybe just a few months ago, and I ran into, a gentleman. I slightly know him. I mean, we've been introduced, and I have, marketed my business, and I recognized him. I saw him, and, I went up to him and greeted him and said, "Oh, wow, you look really nice. I'm really happy to see you." And for whatever reason, he felt like it was okay to say, "Wow, it's really good to see you. You're just over here shining and glistening all in front of my face." That was his reply. Now, again, he felt like that was a compliment.
Right.
So do I condemn him for his intention or for the result?
So now, LaShondra, let me ask you a question since you brought it up. So now, whatever outfit you had on that day, you had on, right?
Right.
Now, because we just talked about, you think you have to think about things, right?
Right.
Now, the next time you go somewhere and you got that same outfit, do you go back to that and think about it, or say, was I glistening the way he said it was? Was it a sexual thing? Do you think about that?
It depends.
Okay.
In that particular case, no, I didn't really think about it.
Okay.
But it was a little shocking when I,
Okay.
in the moment. But as a woman, you can't hold on to that. You have to keep moving, and you have to keep pushing, because it's going to happen again.
Okay.
And that's the unfortunate thing. So the outfit that I had on, was a professional attire.
Sure.
But at the same time, as a woman, I want to be professional, but there's a part of me that wants to feel sexy, that wants to feel attractive, and that's okay. That's okay. But when I'm entering into those spaces where it's about business, it is a harder push to move the energy to business, and that's just something that we have to do. But at the same time, once you get to that space, then you're off and running. So it's not so much of a roadblock. It's more of an obstacle.
Okay.
You just have to overcome.
Okay. And I like the way you said that. Helen, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of also piggyback and say, in general, we're talking about it from the perspective of perception, of awareness. And then there's that element of women in the room where you also want to feel seen and not be invisible, which is, it's to the contrary of, it's also really, particularly when you're talking about in these business settings, like in your industry outreach, and you see those women who are sort of clustered against the wall, and they're not engaging and walking up, as you said, to all these men in the room and introducing themselves and making the sale. And, that too can be the fact that you saw them, you are more aware. But that too is part of this. It's waking up, as LaShondra said, it's waking up a bit more awareness.
Mhm.
Okay.
And
Okay.
also using your presence to your benefit, because men are very visual.
Okay.
That is true across the board. If a man has eyes, then he's using them. And he responds and moves based on what he sees first. So I'm just here to tell you, if you show up wearing a potato sack and looking like you just rolled out of bed, no one's going to see you.
Okay.
Facts, right? Now, I think it's okay, to involve sort of your feminine wilds, because that's a part of who you are. That's a part of what attracts both men and women to you.
Okay.
It's being in your power, and your power is a combination of all of those things. So the thing that I don't want to advocate is to women, don't be sexy, don't spend time grooming yourself, making yourself look nice, make sure you do all that, but just understand that you're going to be seen a certain way. And my thing is, own it. Because if you walk into the room and you're being seen as, a sexual being, as someone that's nice to look at, as someone that has, sexual energy that can be felt and received, own that. That
Okay.
is your right as a woman, as a human being, to own that. And that's the thing. It's when you don't own it is where the blocks start. And
Okay.
understand that you're going to get that. But at the same time, there's the other side of it. Once all of that's been owned and established, hey, sir, thank you for the compliments. However, this is why I'm here. And this is what I want to talk to you about.
Okay.
So now you move the energy to something different. But you can't go around it. You can't go under it. You can't go over it. You have to go through it to get to where you want. So the question is, how do you navigate going through all of that to get to that space?
So that's my next question to both of you then. And Helen, tell me this. How have you been successful when it comes to networking? What tools do you employ? Right. And from a practical standpoint, because there's people listening, there's people who are just starting out in business, there's people who've been in the industry for years. They're listening to you. Listen, I'm not a woman. I couldn't tell you how to network as a woman. I know how to network as a big 6'4" black man. That's all I can tell you, because that's all I am. But how do you go about, because you've been successful, both of you have been very successful at it, right? LaShondra, that's how I got to know you, is through a networking event, right? You and your husband.
Yep.
So Helen, we grew up in the industry together.
Mhm.
So tell me, and I've watched you, I've seen you how you negotiate with people, but
Because I've been at this a long time. I've been working at this a long time. So I don't, and I was just thinking as LaShondra was talking, I think there might be some generational differences too, as it relates to this. I said it earlier, but the more you're talking, the more I'm thinking about some of the sessions we have with the emerging professional women versus more established women. And I think the greatest challenge, honestly, Stefan, is with some of our emerging leadership women and entrepreneurs, learning some of the tools to sort of work through the process. And,
okay.
I always try to do textbook type stuff. Know the room that you're walking in. It's just like with anything else. That's the same thing a man would do. No different. Who's the audience? Being prepared for what I'm going into the room for, what I expect to accomplish when I'm in the room. Just, as I said, for my generation, I get up, I already know I'm in uniform when I'm at work. I don't mix the two, but that's just me. I'm just one person. I think a woman should show up any way she chooses, her truth, whoever she is. And I don't think that we need to, and certainly I think, and this is where that sort of age and generational thing, I think some of our younger professionals would be taken back to think that it would be even in this conversation if they thought we meant that they should be something other than who they are too.
Right.
Because they
Right.
want authentic selves and they don't feel that they need to modify that to fit,
Right.
Insecurities.
Right. Right. And I agree with you. But the whole purpose of this is really to, I've had discussions with other women in the industry and throughout industries, and we've talked about this very subject. But I just wanted to bring awareness to
But
it. And
I
go ahead,
think
sorry.
the women, we're having conversations with each other.
But see,
Again, I think it really is. I'm thinking about all the organizations that are women. You mentioned my sorority. I mean, I've got all kind of organizations that I'm affiliated with that are women based. We all are very familiar with these things. The very thing that was said at the very beginning, awareness, awareness, awareness. And how do we begin to close some of the gaps? Because we need each other. We need men to advocate for women.
that's right.
We're all in it together. So it's a
Right.
big. So for me, it's just, it's been over the years. You learn, you get some wins and losses along the way that you learn as you go. But certainly I do think it's important to be your authentic self, but to just know the audience and know the room you're walking in and try to prepare for that.
What would you
Yeah.
say, LaShondra?
I mean, I agree with and respect Helen's point of view. I think there's a whole lot of truth in what she's saying, but it is a dance and it's a fine line because if you take the business aspect out of it, between men and women, and I'm talking about typical interactions between men and women. You don't want to take away the polarity that happens between the masculine and feminine. And when I say masculine and feminine, I'm not just talking about men and women, because there's a lot of men that carry a lot of feminine energy. There's a lot of women that carry a lot of masculine energy. So the trick that I've learned is understanding how to navigate masculine and feminine energy, because that's what we're really talking about.
Okay.
Because you have masculine energy that's very probing, it's very penetrating, it's very aggressive, it's very driven and assertive, right? And then you have feminine energy that's much more creative, it's much more flowy, it's much more abstract, right? And so when you're in these spaces, you have to understand the energy, because there's plenty of men that I've met where I've had to be the assertive one.
Okay.
I wasn't hitting on anybody, but understanding, like Helen said, understanding your audience, because I think what makes the connection, regardless of if it's a business or a casual, is the polarity in which you're matching energies. So if I'm sitting in front of a decision maker and I'm selling my business, and he's carrying a lot of masculine energy, and that's the space he's sitting in, then I'm going to naturally shift to more of my feminine energy, because that's the connection, right? And
Right.
then once a connection is established, then you establish trust, and now you can move in and out of that masculine and feminine energy.
Yeah.
As makes sense for the relationship. So so that might be a little deep. I looked a little deep dive down there.
No,
But
I think it's pretty good.
but I want to open it up, because again, it's not all about labeling men as this and women as that, because there's a lot of aggressive women out there,
Yes, it is.
and there's, and then you have your share of, men out there that, like I said, are leading with what they see and, first. So I think if more people understood the energetic side of interactions between men and women, it's going to uncover a lot, and it's going to make people more aware and more sensitive to what type of energy they're putting out and what type of energy they're taking in.
Okay. All right. So go ahead, Helen.
I was just going to say that was well said. That was put in a way that was a lot different than I've heard it communicated. And I appreciate you just sort of presenting that in that way, that it's not even gender, it's the energy.
Yeah.
Whether it's a man or a woman, it didn't matter.
Okay. And I like the way she put that. That's why we had LaShondra on the podcast. We've had these deep discussions before. So, but in any event, so when people listen to this podcast in 60 seconds, I want you to tell, what advice would you give to someone who is listening in today or viewing the podcast, a woman, maybe it's a young woman just getting into the industry, excuse me. What advice would you give them? I'm gonna go Helen first.
Mm-hmm. I would say to them, I always find that make sure you know who you are. I mean, do some self-definition. We go into all kind of spaces. You got to feel comfortable with yourself. That's the first thing. And then I think that helps you be better equipped to deal with the various circumstances that come with interaction. Networking and communicating is so important to what we do. It impacts every single thing that we do.
Yes,
So
it does.
It's something that we really do. I think we do it without fully sometimes cognitively thinking through it, as LaShondra just sort of walked us through the masculine and feminine. I just think that, I would say to women in this business, be authentically yourself, but also be aware and just go in, when you're walking into situations, you should also have some idea of, what's your purpose for being there, and make it something that is also beneficial, if for lack of a better word.
Okay. LaShondra?
That's such a loaded question, because everyone's different, and so it's kind of tough to give general advice, because there are certain things that I would say to certain women that I wouldn't say to other women, right?
Okay.
But I'll answer the question, but I'll talk about myself.
Okay.
So, I don't know, 13, 14 years in the game. We started JLM in 2011. We actually started the company in 2009. We had a name change in 2011 to JLM. So I've been in the industry for a little while. And if I were to give myself advice, based on what I've been through now and when I first started, number one, I would definitely make sure that I, just like Helen said, had an awareness, of who I am. Now, who I was then and who I am now are two different people, right? So be open, be open to learning about yourself, because there is no way, 13, 14 years ago that I knew who I was. I knew some parts of myself, but when you enter this entrepreneurial world, let me tell you, them bones gonna come flying out that closet, because it's such an emotional journey. It's such a spiritual journey. And the only way that you're really going to have true success is that you really work on yourself and being open to your blind spots, being open to things that are going on in your aura and in your space that you may not be attached to, right? You know, when I first started in the business, let me tell you, I was out there, I was marketing, I had my little duffel bag, roller bag with my computer hanging out the side. I had my business cards. I had my black patent leather shoes. I just knew I was about to go in here and kill it. And I would come home. I would have a stack of cards. I was like, yes, I met this person and this person and that person. And I would say 98% of those cards were worthless. They were worthless. And I remember even one situation where a gentleman was dating me and I didn't even know it. Because we happened to be at an event, me and my husband, and he was there. And actually, me and my husband were dating at the time. And someone had announced that we were engaged. And, you know, unbeknownst to us, we didn't know they were going to do that. So they were like, oh, you know, I want to send a special shout out to Jason and LaShondra. They just got engaged. And we just happened to be sitting next to this guy that I had, you know, gone to lunch with and talked business about. And he was flabbergasted. His mouth was wide open. He was like, what? Well, you didn't tell me you was dating anybody. I thought we were cool. And I looked at him. I was like, were we dating? Because that's not why I went to the lunch. Because a lot of times when you're out there in the field, you think that you're having a conversation about business, but you're really being sized up.
Okay.
And understanding the difference between the two.
Yes. Yes.
And that was something that I had to get really, really smart about. Who's about it? Who's wasting my time? Because at the end of the day, you cannot control other people. No matter how hard you try, you're not going to be able to do it. But what you can control is you. And you can control your process. You can control how you show up and how you navigate and understand who is for you and who is not for you. And so when I think back to my earlier days in this business, I spent so much time just that stuff just really going over my head. Now I can see it coming a mile away. And I have different tools and word tracks that I can use that helps me get right on out of that situation. You know, because if someone is asking me, hey, you know, well, can we meet for drinks? And, you know, I'll say, okay, well, what are we going to do at drinks? Well, what is your intention? Is it okay if I bring my husband along? You'll learn real quick.
Right.
I mean, obviously not everybody has a husband, but you got to start asking, you know, straight up, well, are we going to drink to talk business or is this social? Is this going to be casual or this is about business? And be comfortable with just asking what the intentions are.
Right.
Because once you do that, then they're going to know you're serious. And now you put the onus on the other person to decide whether they want to move forward with you, because now they have an expectation of what this meeting is going to be about. I'll gladly go to drinks with you if we're going to discuss X, Y, and Z and A, B, and C. And my hope to get out of this meeting is that we either going to do business or you're going to refer me to someone that I can do business with that can make some decisions. Is that a potential for this meeting? Yes or no?
Okay. Good advice. Good advice. Somebody gave me advice one time and I always regarded it. And they said, breakfast and lunch is for business. Dinner is for significant others and family members. And I've lived by that and it has worked well for me. So it has happened to me, LaShondra, where, believe it or not, I'm thinking, yeah, we going to dinner, just talk business. I was on a date. I didn't know I was on a date, but in any event, so I get it. It happens on both ends. And I was kind of surprised. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I think I'm on a date. I thought I was coming out and get some business. I didn't know. So yes, I do understand. It's kind of silly, right? But thank God, like, you think I would know that. But anyway. So,
But yeah, it's just about stating your intentions. And I think that's
right,
the thing that gets lost, because when you're in business mode, sometimes you're desperate, you want to, you don't want to come off as too pushy,
right,
you really want the business. But what I'm learning is owning your space, and owning your integrity, whatever that means, and for some women, integrity means, I got the girls out, we're going to hang out or whatever. And that's okay. There's no judgment from me. All I'm saying is just own it, because we can talk until we're blue in the face. Is the issue is not going to go away.
right, right,
You're still going to have, a much different experience as a woman, than a man.
right.
But it's just understanding and owning it and knowing where you fit in within those spaces that works for you and that will allow you to be successful. That's what I had to learn.
Okay.
So, LaShondra, I'm just going to say, I want to go back and recap. That's that piece I'm talking about, knowing the room and why are you there and what are you expecting to accomplish. I'm more academic, I guess, in the way I communicate, but I'm saying the exact same thing you're saying. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that it has to be that. And that was such a great example. I was just thinking too, Steph, I know you pushing us on time at 45.
No, I don't want to hold you guys up. No, please, you can keep talking.
No, this is just, I was just thinking, you had talked about how to continue to expand these kind of conversations.
Right.
And I do think, as, again, I'm going to lean on you a little bit, sister LaShondra here. This feminine and masculine piece, I think, is having also some male colleagues to be involved in this very same kind of dialogue. And it will be interesting. You're almost conducting like a focus group at this point, Mr. Montgomery, to begin to start to really take this thing on. We're looking for solutions to help other entrepreneurs better connect and communicate. I think this will be it would be very helpful to all of us to see how that next phase goes.
So, Helen, I said this was part one. Part two of this is to get the men that I will invite on the show. We're going to talk about the same thing, but they're going to listen to you guys, what you just said, right? And listen to the show. And then part three we will do men and women together. So I may invite you to come back to the show again and we do it with the men and have this same discussion, because I think bringing awareness, it just can't be the ladies saying something. The men we have to have their discussion with them, and then we do it all together and we bring awareness to this topic, because I just think it's such an important topic. And the more awareness we bring to it, I think the better it will be for everybody.
Exactly.
Yes.
But I also want to make sure that what's included in this topic when we're discussing it is a level of empathy and compassion for both sexes. I think that's super important, and really understanding what it's like to walk in the other person's shoes, because there is an element or an elephant in the room that I think people have a hard time discussing, because at the end of the day, yes, these industries are male dominated. It is aggressive at times, but at the same time, that aggressive, we need that in our society. We don't necessarily need it in all the spaces, but you don't want to suppress, that in our men. It's really a conversation of how to channel it in productive ways, right? Because we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And
Right.
It's the same for women. We don't want to completely strip women of their sexuality. But there is a way to engage with women where they are not looked upon as sexual objects. And it's a very fine line. So we just want to make sure that we have an understanding of what it's like to walk in a man's shoes, because men need that aggression, because there's a high expectation to protect, to provide, to, if someone is attacking you, that aggression is going to come in handy. right?
Right.
To be able to get things done and to have that determination, drive, assertiveness. There's a level of testosterone that's needed, but the problem is that some men sit in it way too long and they're not in touch with their feminine. They don't have balance. So a lot of what you're seeing is imbalance. Same thing with women. So it's
Right.
really understanding how to balance those energies, because that's the genesis of it all. The behavior, the experiences is all just symptoms of the real root cause of exactly what we're talking about.
Yes. And I'm going to say this. You can see LaShondra's podcast, Real Talk, on wherever podcasts are available. You can tell she's very experienced in this subject because I've listened to her podcast, and this is what she talks about. She talks about this realism. She talks about real things. Me and her have had many discussions about being an entrepreneur and the things that are going to come out of it. And she's absolutely right. Some of this stuff I've heeded, and it has helped me a great deal. So this is the last question, ladies. So now that you have survived the $1 Million Business Podcast, who would you recommend that we have on the podcast name? One person, just one person. Who would you recommend? I'm gonna go with Helen first. Who would you recommend we have on?
Wow. Okay. And this is a continuation of this dialogue or on?
No, it could be anything in general. It doesn't have to be a continuation of this dialogue.
Totally intrigued by it. He always seems to and just kind of bring a different perspective on things is Phil Washington. And Phil's probably gonna go, what? But he is just one of those people that he just has the ability to see things in a lot of different perspectives.
Yes, he does.
And what I also like about him is he's a man who walks his talk. That if he puts it out there to you, he's willing to stand by it and to act on it. Yes. So that in itself is just a role model that we're all aspiring to be more like in our day-to-day too. But he is definitely someone that I just find intriguing, and certainly with his new initiatives that he's got going to level the playing field for minority businesses. I just think all of that, because it all comes together, as LaShondra said, it's all connected.
Right. We're all connected. Right. Yeah. We're all connected. And he's one of the people we have on our list for 24. We have to ask him to be on the podcast. So yeah, we'll try to have him.
It would be interesting.
It would be interesting.
Yeah.
LaShondra, who would you say?
Well, this is an easy one for me. Stephanie Wiggins.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Because I met with her recently regarding a program that I'm working on in relation to a metro project, a rather large metro project, $3.5 billion project here in Southern California. And she's so dynamic, and she has such a vision for what LA's transportation can look like. But aside from all that, she's the first Black female, to be the CEO of a major, metropolitan transit authority in one of the cities that has some of the largest infrastructure projects rolling out and getting to roll out in the country. And so just understanding her perspective and what it's like for her as a woman, as a minority woman, to navigate in this industry. I mean, let me tell you something. My eyes and ears are going to be glued to the screen, because for what she has on her plate is going to be a roadmap for a lot of us.
Okay. And I might have to use your influence to help me get her on here. So, but yes, I would think that Stephanie would be a great guest. There's a lot of complexity to her and running that organization. Helen, you were going to say something. I think we cut you off.
Oh, I heard the first Black woman. I just wanted to clarify that there are others who are in large transit systems. But and look, I need to find an East Coast balance to this West Coast. Well, Phil's still West Coast, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
Coast back.
Yeah.
Well, well, let me clarify. She's the first CEO for
for
LA.
LA Pro.
For LA Metro.
Yeah.
That's,
That's
where
Right,
what it
right.
is.
Yeah, I want to make sure we didn't offend any of our female
No.
out here
No.
changing the world, because we got some dynamic ones out there.
Yeah, we do.
doing great
We
things.
do. Yeah, we do.
No competition. You know, there's room for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, ladies, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast. This was a lot of fun, being such good guests, bringing some insight to the podcast. And to my audience and to my guests, this is just part one. Networking is so important for business. And so we need to bring on the males, have them watch the podcast, and we'll share their thoughts on what they think, how networking goes. I hope this is going to be a very interesting series. If you want to know who else is coming on our podcast, I would ask you to go to our website, themilliondollarbusinesspodcast.com. Once again, thank you all for joining us. I'm Stefan Montgomery, and this is the $1 Million Business Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show today. The information we discussed here today was just that, informational only. It is not specific advice. If you take action following something you heard today, it is important that you make sure you get professional advice about your unique situation before you proceed. Please reach out to us if you have any questions, or if there's another topic you would like to see explored, or if you know someone who might benefit from the show, remember to tell them about us. You can find the $1 Million Business Podcast on all podcast platforms or our visual podcast on YouTube. Thank you for viewing and listening.